Hi. Okay. Hello. Hello, everybody. Hello. I'm Gail Carriger. I hope I am live on Facebook at the moment, or not live on YouTube later, for those of you who are catching the upload later. So far, there's no eyeballs watching. On Facebook Live, they'll show me little eyeballs when somebody's watching, but that might be me. You know how I am with technology. Terrible. I'm terrible with it. Or it's terrible with me. Maybe it's the technology's fault. Maybe it's not my fault. Aha! June! Hello, darling. All right, excellent. So now we know that at least somebody has found me. Hi, it is, and more people are finding me. Wonderful. Hello, Robert. All right, as ever, please do comment with where you're tuning in from. That also allows me to test the system and make sure I can see comments, because sometimes I can't. And then I have to get on. Margaret, hello, excellent, a comment. Wonderful. Happy Saturday, everybody, or Sunday if you're down under. Today I am drinking my tea, the Space Oolong tea. I actually, I'm drinking it out of a vessel that you can see the color. Good evening. Good evening to some of you. So yes, I'm having oolong this afternoon. I just didn't feel like something too aggressive, too much to drink. Let's get the... Oh, good. I'm very glad that Facebook reminded some of you that this was happening. That's always nice when the technology works, Right. So it's Saturday, and I promised that in today's live, I would talk to you all about books, as in what happens when I finish writing a book. So a lot of authors will talk about the whole writing process and what it's like to create the thing. But then what happens after that? In between the time it actually gets in front of you, I guess. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about what that was like. Any additional minutia that we need to chat about? Tell me what you're drinking, everybody. So like I said, I'm drinking the Deep Blue Abyss from Steampunk Tea, which is the tea that I helped to create, which is a butterfly pea flower and oolong tea, and it's delicious, if I do say so myself. That's what I'm having this afternoon. I'll put a link somewhere at some point. And I am wearing, I've gone old school on the lipstick, everybody. I'm wearing MAC. Yes, this is a tiny sample. I don't like to buy full-size products in general, but I'm wearing MAC's Ruby Woo, which, if you are retro, from like the 90s retro, this is the lipstick. It's a cool toned red that everybody wore when you were doing a 1950s look. Everybody wore MAC's Ruby Woo. And I just found it again recently, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna see if that's still a good lipstick. And the answer is yeah, it's still a good lipstick. It's basic, it's not like a color stay or anything like that, but I think it's a pretty good color. It's one of my favorites. And I'm wearing my pear eyeglasses. These are the ones that have like the removable frames, so you can change the color. And I've become quite an addict because I can have a frame that matches every outfit. And my little head wrap came originally from Amazon. And I'm wearing teal today. The new book is green. The new book cover is green. And again, in classic me fashion, I did not prepare by actually having, the cover art to show you. It's right here on my computer. I can see it. But I forgot to load it onto my iPad so I could show it to you. Although, I probably could if you give me a second. But I'll share it. You can see it in the feed. It's in, it's on all the social medias and everything. I posted it. It's a very cute cover. It has an otter framing, and then a young man in the frame, and then the typology and everything is green, and of course it matches the previous books in the series, which are these guys. So the forthcoming book is called The DRATSIE Dilemma, and it is in this series. So these are the 3 existing books in the series, and this is number 4. And it's looking like it's going to be pretty fat. And that brings us to our discussion today, which is what happens after I finish the rough draft. So for me, and I'm an author who likes to edit quite a bit, I finished the rough draft, and then I have to do a couple of passes myself before anybody else gets to see it. So the rough draft for me is very, very rough. I'm a terrible speller, and I'm not very great on grammar. So if you follow me on social media, you will have noticed these things about me, because I will often tweet or post without double checking that I spelled everything correctly, because it looks fine to me, and I'm a terrible speller. So it's terrible. The condition of my rough draft is particularly bad. So I usually have to do 2 to 4 passes before anything else happens to it. So I'll do a TK pass where I'll read through the whole book and look for the letters T and K that I've left for myself. It's kind of like checking over margin notes. So I'm looking to see things I left for myself to do when the book is done. So sometimes it'll be a research thing. I didn't want to get distracted while I was writing, so I'll have to go like check the location of something that's in the book, or in the case of like some of the steampunk stuff, check to make sure that's the right word, or that piece of technology existed in that time period, those sorts of things. So I'll do all my checking, basically. That brings me to my first draft, essentially. So the first draft means, to me, all the words are there, right? All the words are in place where they're supposed to be. There are no gaps. There's nothing I left for myself in the future. For future me. There's no work I left for future me to do. For those who may have asked, I write and I do these edit passes all in Scrivener. And that's just because I like the interface of Scrivener. It has a UI I really enjoy. I try not to use Word at all, ever, anymore. I never liked it when I had to use it, and now I don't have to use it, so I try not to use it. So that's that pass. Then I will usually do like a read-through pass. Either I will have the computer read it out loud to me, or I'll read it out loud, sometimes both. And that's because if I start processing a book audio-wise, I catch different mistakes. And by that means, I catch mistakes that are like classic misspellings that I just missed, and so the computer reads it out to me and I realize it's a misspelling. Or more commonly, mistakes in like tone and cadence. So I dropped a word, or I repeated words, or it doesn't quite suit the character. And oddly enough, my voice or the computer's voice, even though that's not the character's voice in my head, it helps me catch those things. So I'll do those couple of passes. So now we're at like version 3, version 4, basically. And that's the point at which it goes to a developmental editor. If it's a short story, I usually don't use a developmental editor, but anything longer than novella and longer, I will use a developmental editor. That is an editor who specializes in the story aspect and not the like type. So no typos. They will sometimes find typos, but that's not their primary job. Their primary job is to make sure that it reads well. So that's an enjoyable experience, that the plot goes correctly, that the characters stay consistent, that there's character growth, that if it's 2 different characters, both characters are getting enough page time so you really get a feel for both characters. So that's essentially what a developmental editor does. And they're pretty expensive. It's a lot of work. So it's a step that a lot of authors skip, but I tend to think if you're earlier on in your career, you should not skip the developmental editing process. If you're working with a traditional publisher, your acquiring editor, the person who got your book, is also your developmental editor. So that in publishing, the editor, when authors say my editor, they're usually speaking about this editor, their developmental editor or their acquiring editor, the person who found them and decided to buy the book for the publisher. So that's the developmental edit process. So for DRATSIE Dilemma, that's the stage we're in. So I have the pre-order up because once I've finished a book, I know it's going to happen. I know I'm going to be able to bring it to you. So once the like first, second draft is done, that's when I usually put my books up for pre-order. And that's because nothing in my life is going to derail the book at that juncture. It's pretty much smooth sailing. So usually around the time when I have pre-order up, because I tend to try and do a pre-order that's like at least 3 months these days, or quite a few months, that's about the time that it's going to its developmental editor. So DRATSIE Dilemma went off to its developmental editor, and now it's back. So the next stage for me, while I hope you guys help me get the word out that the book is now available for pre-order, I will be doing its developmental pass. So that usually takes me a couple of weeks. Depends on how many edits there are and how do I put this? I always think about books as a little bit like a tapestry, and sometimes there's a thread that gets pulled because of a developmental edit that you have to follow throughout the course of the book, but it's just one thread. It's relatively easy to follow. And sometimes there's a big chunk or a big section of the tapestry that needs to be rewoven, or a whole section that gets eaten out by moths. You're like, oh yeah, I have to tear that out, so you gotta redo these bits. So some developmental edits are a lot more challenging than others, and often developmental editors don't know. Like, so the editor will be like, oh, I'm so sorry, this looks like it's a really hard edit. And you're like, actually, that's 2 sentences. That's all I have to change. And sometimes the editor is like, just change this thing. And they hand wavy, and it turns out I have to rewrite the second half of the book or something, right? So editors notoriously bad at telling you how much work their edits are going to be. Anyway, so then I go in, I'll do the developmental edit. Generally speaking, there'll be little scene-by-scene things that needs to be fixed. Those are easy to do. And then there'll be sort of longer things that move throughout, like the weighting of the attention on 2 different characters, or the growth of a character or something. That gonna need a little bit more focus. So I tend to take my developmental edit letter and then I break it down into chunks. So I'll divide it up so that I'm like, all of this stuff are sort of scene-by-scene fixes that occur in the first third of the book. These all occur in the middle of the book. These all occur at the end. Then there'll be like universal fixes, things I'm going to have to keep my eye on throughout. And then there'll be what I call quick fixes, which is like name changes, things that can be done with a find and replace. So things that can be done using tools already provided for me by the software. So easy fixes, those ones. So yeah, then I'll start laying them in. So I'll just start chapter by chapter doing these edits. That's how that pass goes. Like I said, it's usually just a couple of weeks for me, but there have been a couple of occasions, and some of you who are long-term fans will have followed these books. There are 2 infamous books. In my case, those infamous books were this one, Blameless, and this one, Prudence, both of which had massive, massive edits at the developmental edit stage. In the case of Prudence, I ended up having to take a delay on my deadline for that book, which I never had to do before that. Usually I'm pretty good on meeting my deadlines. So that was rough all around. And in the case of Prudence, it was just the general voice was really, really muddied the first time around with this book, because I was in the middle of writing the Finishing School series and I had just finished the Parasol Protectorate series. And so Prudence's voice was kind of a mixture of the 2, and it just wasn't working out well. And that's how I learned that I'm one of those authors who needs to entirely focus on one series when I'm writing a series. So when the time came around for me to write the Tinkered Star Song books, that's why I wrote them all back to back, because I think I'm just a better, more solid, consistent author if when I'm writing a series, I write the whole thing one after another. That was that learning process. In the case of Blameless, which is much older, it's hard for me to remember, but essentially there was an active-passive issue with Alexia's motivations in this book that meant I needed to seed a bunch of stuff earlier on in the book, and then I had to rewrite like the final third of this book. So this was the first book that I had a real massive rewrite on in my career. So that was a learning experience, we'll say. So that's what the development, so in both of those cases, it took me months to do those rewrites, but most of the time it only takes me a couple weeks now. I mean, I'm 30 books on from those books, so I've learned a couple of things, and one of the things I've learned is sort of my own voice and pacing and how I lay words on the page, and so even with an outline, which I do write from an outline, I'm a little bit more consistent in the rough draft. So in other words, as I've grown and moved through my career as an author, my rough drafts are just less rough. So the drafts that eventually make it to developmental editing stage are just less messy to deal with in general. That said, every book is different. So the DRATSIE Dilemma is told in the present and the past. So it's this flipped idea. And that's a new kind of style for me and a new layout for me, because I really wanted you to learn the original romance of these characters, since it's kind of a reunion, second chance romance. And I didn't want you to feel like one character was in the wrong because of what happened to them in their past. And so that meant I have to tell you while you are present with them falling in love with each other originally what happened. And that meant I had to tell the past and the present. And I decided to flop the chapters back and forth. So there's some pacing stuff going on, not to get all weedy in the mechanics of things. And yeah, so it's different. So who knows? The developmental editor might have caught stuff in that regard. Every book is different. Every book has new problems and issues and concerns and worries. You know how it goes. Anyway, so that's the developmental edit part of the equation, which for me is usually like the biggest hurdle in the editing session. So we do that, and then the book has to take time to go to the editor, which usually takes a developmental editor about 2 weeks, and you have to book them ahead of time. So I have to know when I'm going to be done with the book for them to have it. I have to book for a time in their vacancy, right? So the best editors are just as in demand as everybody else. So you have to like book your slot, and who knows how the creative process goes. So there's all of this prediction, like okay, I'm going to be done here. I'm going to book the editor for here, and I have to get it into the editor in time. Then they have to edit it. Then they have to get it back to me. Then I have to edit it. So as you can imagine, that takes a certain amount of time, usually about a month if everything's going well. And then I go into the next stage. So the next stage for me is these books go to my beta readers. Now, my beta readers are some of you. I pulled beta readers about maybe 15 years ago, a while ago, from you guys, from my super fans, from my reader base. And these are readers who are really devoted to my various series, who reread those series regularly. That's important so that the works are fresh in their head, so they're all caught up. And who were just particularly good at noticing consistency and in-world chronology errors. And that's because I tend to write in series, and I tend to write a lot of books set in the same universe with a lot of crossover characters. So there's a lot of ways you can catch me out if I make a little mistake in, say, a character's eye color or something like that. So I have to make sure that somebody out there is familiar with the whole breadth of the universe and is double checking that I'm getting everything right. And that's really what my beta readers do. And now these days there are 4 of them, and they read one after another with no interruptions from me, and they tend to read each other's comments. And that's actually helpful because they'll get into little comment back and forth discussions over, one of them will identify an error and another one might be like, yeah, I don't think that's an error because in this book that happened. And then someone else will be like, no, the first person is right. Or no, I too don't think it's an error. And then someone else might say, well, Gail, you could just delete this. You don't need to say this at all, So them having a conversation with each other is actually really useful for me. And I gotta say, my beta readers have caught a major error in world continuity in every single book I've written since I've been writing indie, right? So since they've been beta reading for me. So since 2016, they've always caught a serious error. So I find beta readers absolutely invaluable. Then I do all of those edits. So the beta readers usually take about 2 weeks to go through all 4 of them, and then they get it back to me. And then I take another 2 weeks to review again. So that's another month. So you can see how timing works, right? Then it goes to my copy editor. And my copy editor goes through and finds all of the typos. Now some of my beta readers will also catch these things, but my copy editors catch most of it. And then I do the final fixes. And that version, the version just after the copy edit, is the version that goes to the print press, because print has to be uploaded well before everything else. The digital version I can keep tinkering with and editing right up until like a week before release. So generally speaking, the digital version is the cleanest version because it does actually get another beta pass, but I don't always have time to put those final perfection edits into my print edition, because the way print works in publishing, you have to get the assets to the publisher much earlier. So there are usually a few more typos and errors in print versions of my indie books than there are in the digital versions of my indie books. So just eventually the print assets are fixed, but it takes a little bit longer. So if you get a first edition of the indie books, it really is a first edition. It really is slightly different from all of the following publications. And by my indie books, I mean like this series and this, you know, these books, the sci-fi books and the San Andreas or the contemporary books. And then the indie books that are from me in the Parasolverse are slightly different. They have a different copy editor. So I hire a copy editor who specifically specializes in historical set stuff. And that's because I want to make sure that there's one editor at least whose eyes are on the, you know, the setting as well as everything else. So there it is. That is essentially what happens before the book goes to press and after it has been finished. So I hope you can see why it takes a while. Not every author is like me. Not every author likes editing as much as I do. I enjoy the editing process. I like perfecting a book as much as possible. I am an innately tidy person and I like tidying up my words just like everything else. We're not going to call it anal retentive, but it might be a little bit. And that's why I have such an elaborate editing process, I think. So the version that you guys get, I think, has had something on the order of, say, 6 to 8 to as many as 10 passes, but it's usually around 6 these days. And now I'm going to scroll back through and take a look at some of your questions while I was nattering away. I pause for a sip of tea. So Reese asks how to become a beta reader. Well, the first thing I did for picking beta readers is I actually ran my newsletter subscribers through a survey. And they just, most of you, this is a great secret, most of you thought you were just taking a survey, but actually you were taking a beta reader survey. So I was using it, so I asked some questions which might have seemed off the wall at the time. This was way back in like 2015, 2016, somewhere in there. They might have seemed like very strange and off the wall questions. It was a massive survey. And, you know, it was like 30 questions or something. But actually I was tunneling in to try to find a couple of beta readers. And yeah, and so they were questions like, do you know how to use Microsoft Word, track changes, for example, right? Like I don't have time to like train anybody to use technology. You need to, if you're going to beta read for me, you need to use the technology that I use, so you're comfortable with that system. There were also some sort of like personality questions in there. So I want to work with beta readers who aren't particularly proprietary about my words, so they don't think that what I've written is perfect, but also they're not proprietary about the way they think it should be written. So for example, I don't like to use other authors as beta readers. I prefer readers as beta readers, so people who like to read and enjoy books and are interested in language and the arrangement of words on page, but don't particularly want to produce that themselves. That's like part of the beta reader process. And there were a couple of other questions that I asked. So yes, the moral of the story is always take a survey from Gail, because sometimes out of the blue, she might be like, hey, what would you think about becoming a beta reader for me? Yeah, and I had originally about 10 beta readers, and it sort of whittled down over the years to just sort of like 4 stalwarts who are still fighting the good fight. And then I have a little cadre of like super fans who have made themselves known to be as super supporters of me or my work over the years, and they also get early reader copies as part of their like, you know, special treatment with me, and they'll also give me typos and stuff because you know they know how I am. Yes, you know, that's like often friends, family friends, and you know, that kind of a thing, right? So that's you kind of have to be a real life friend, I guess, to be in that crew. Yeah, and the beta readers, I don't get anything. If I use a sensitivity reader, which I will often, they are paid. But my beta readers are just devoted readers, and they're charming, and I love them forever, and they're the best. And they get, you know, they get just perks. Like they get to read things early, they get copies of stuff. You know, if I'm in town and I get to meet them, then I'm always very excited. You know, I'll try and take you out for dinner or, you know, have tea at least, something like that. So, you know, it's just, my beta readers are very special to me, but they are all over the world. So none of them are local to me, I don't think. We respect each other's privacy. TK asks, when I hit line edits or copy edits, what are my emotional support phrases that get cut? TK, what a great question. Anybody, TK in the comments is an up-and-coming writer, everybody, asking the tough questions. So, emotional support phrases. So the other word for this, out of us old guard writers is writer tics. So these are words we use a lot. I used to use the word rather all the time, but I think I pretty much got so paranoid about it that I axed it out. I actually have a list of tic words that I use. I also have a list of American-isms that I go in when I'm writing the Parasolverse stuff and change out for more English-isms. And obviously, like, my computer's right here. I could look it up, but it would take me a couple minutes to figure out where it is. But yes, I do have tic words. I have a lot of them, and I keep a list of them to double check. I, have tic words that I've learned to accept, like as part of my style. And I'm not sure if I want to admit them to you, because now you guys will be looking for them, but there's only 20 of you watching, so what the hell. So I like to start sentences with and. I like the conjunction adding to the flow of a paragraph. I think it tonally does make a difference if you use and or not at the start of a sentence. So generally speaking, I've actually put some thought into it every time you see it starting a sentence, but I do like to do it more than a lot of authors do. I also like to use fragment sentences. So sentences that have no subject or that are kind of interrupted thought sentences, especially in speech, and that's because that's how we talk, especially with other people, but also because I like the punchiness of a short sentence on the page. So I like the layout and the look of the sentence on the page. So I also write fragments, which is, again, a choice I am making that is objectively incorrect. So I will hand off what's called a style sheet to all of my editors, which basically says, here are some things that I know that I do, but I like that I do them. As opposed to, say, writer's tic words. So yeah, I have a list of them. I think, suddenly, there are certain words that writers use and we probably shouldn't use as much as we do. So I have a little list of those to go in and check. Frowned, like words that I use when characters are speaking. So said tag words like she frowned and said, comma, blah, 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 blah. So there's a whole bunch of words that are in the frowned category that, I need to double check that it isn't being used too many times in any one scene, for example. Like, you can't keep smiling, you can't keep grinning, you can't keep frowning in the same scene. So you have to go in and, change the vocabulary. Otherwise, it seems redundant. So I would say those are the ones I personally have to double check the most. Right, I'm just scrolling back through, seeing if anybody has other questions. Now, I should say, after having told you all about my process, that this is my process, that if you are a newer author, you don't have to do it this way. It's just the way that works for me because of the way I am as a personality. Like I said, I like being edited, so I have a lot of edit passes, and very few authors have as many as I do, although there are some who have more. TK asks, how does the need to write a series in order work with the Parasolverse novellas? Well, that's one of the reasons. Again, good question. So that's one of the reasons the novellas have different main characters. So if we're talking, for example, about the Delightfully Deadly novellas, these guys, which technically this one's not a novella, it's novel length. This one's almost novel length too, I think, actually. This is the only one that's technically a novella. Just FYI. But we call them novellas publicly. Otherwise, certain persons might be hurt. But hurt. Where was I? What was I doing when I got distracted? Right. So one of the reasons the novellas are standalone stories and have a different main character in each novella is because it's a lot easier for me to write them while also writing other books and series. So because I don't have to get back into the character's voice in order to start the second book in a series, because it's a new character, different voice, different tone. So it's just a lot easier for me to write. And that's one of the reasons I started to write them, and that's one of the reasons you can get them, because it's something I can pick up and do while I'm in the middle of something else. which only a standalone novella is something that my writer brain can handle in that way. So yes, these do interrupt another series I might be writing, but also I will often do these when I am interrupted with other series. So one of the reasons to do the sci-fi stuff is because I can go back and forth between the two, and I don't get bored with any one universe that way. So that's the other way I do it. Generally speaking, if it's something like, for example, thinking about writing another book in this series, what I'm gonna have to do is go back and reread this whole book, which I don't like to do. I don't love rereading my own work. I know, but I'll just see mistakes every time I do it, forever. I will always see mistakes. Somebody once told me, I think it was Monet, one of the master painters used to go into the museum where his painting was hanging. No, I think it was Turner, and continue to paint it even though it was hanging in a gallery already. I feel like that with these books. Like, they're already published, they're out, they've been through all of these beta edits and copy edits and everything, and if I reread the darn thing, I'll still find mistakes in it, from my perspective. So I don't like to reread my own books, but when I'm about to write the next one, and it's been a while since I wrote the previous one in the series, I have to go back and reread the previous books in the series. So, which is another reason why I don't have like incredibly long running series. It's why I don't like Laurel K. Hamilton or Jim Butcher, you guys. I end series because I don't have to go back and reread all the previous books in that series in order to write the next one, which is getting too many words after a while. So that's why 5 books is the longest series I've ever written. It's because of my own innate laziness. No, there's many reasons that I end series and that I only like do, a certain amount of series, there's always a reason why I bring a series to a sort of natural conclusion, and this is one of those reasons, but there's other reasons involved. It's a complicated beast, but contracts are involved when it's trad and various other things. Like the Tinkered Starson series, for example, it was very naturally the length that it wanted to be. Like this one, when I started writing it, it was 3 books. Like, that's how it wanted to be. That's as many books as it was going to be. And that was it. I didn't really have a choice in it. It told me what it wanted to be, and it wanted to be a trilogy. And I was like, well, that's very nice of you. Trilogy is pretty good. And so I wrote it. But, like I said before, every series is different and every series is weird. S.H. Klein asks, oh, how does a human shift into an otter? What about human limbs? Or is that too technical? Well, it is, hello. It is explained in Reticence, pretty much, how the sort of shifter mechanics work to a certain extent. And there's sort of molecules and densities and all sorts of other stuff involved in it. So, the answer is you have to read a book. I am an author. It's fair, right? Just told you to read a book. Yeah, Reticence is the one where it's kind of discussed, basically, at least as far as the Victorians are concerned, how it works. I think by the time the San Andreas Shifter books have rolled around, they've probably got all new theories about it. The real question is, how do mermaids work? And what's they're shifted for? I think I'm at the part where everybody is saying hello, so I think I've covered all of the previous questions. Do we have any new questions? Oh, quite a few. Okay. Hi, Charity. Goodness, everybody's tuning in. Gail! It's too early to start planning Dragonsteel outfits. I'm very excited about Dragonsteel, everybody. I think, because I'm mostly going to be in a booth, and booths have dark curtains at Dragonsteel. Dragonsteel is an event in Salt Lake. I will be there, but I will also be at Under the Umbrella, a lovely little queer bookstore in Salt Lake. So check out my events page. You'll see it all there. And so you don't have to come to Dragonsteel if you don't have tickets, because I know they're sold out. You can come and see me at the bookstore instead. And please do. I would love to see you. This is my first time doing anything in Salt Lake City. So it would be great if you came out and said hi, because that would be awesome. However, it's never too early to start planning outfits, and I'm warning you now that right now I am leaning in favor of cream-colored outfits, light-colored outfits, because the booth has a dark backdrop, and I want to stand out against the curtains. But also, I know sci-fi fantasy fans, and I know epic fantasy fans, and let me tell you, they tend to wear dark colors. And so I want to stand out. So I will probably not be wearing dark colors. So that's how you'll be able to find me, is I'll be wearing like creams and whites and light colors. So there's a good chance that the teal and green and blue parasol skirt will come out to play. And I have this new like fluttery multi-tiered nonsense skirt that I think I'm going to be wearing with sort of steampunky elements to it. So that's my plan. Anyway, I don't know what your plan is, but it's never too early to start planning outfits. I mean, is that not why one goes to a con, to dress up? Well, the reason I go to a con, and to see you, but mostly I just love dressing up. Yeah, so I'm excited about it, in case you couldn't. This is the first time I will have done this kind of event, which is basically a like author vendor event. It's a little bit more like a book fair or what romance writers do. And so I'm a little nervous about it, but also I'll mostly be hanging out with friends and seeing friends. So I think I'm going to have a good time. And I am going to definitely try to have DRATSIE Dilemma there with me. Although it is like 3 days after it releases. So hopefully I can get a bunch of books in time to take with me. Back to your questions. Erin asks, does my spider plant have a name? I have one called Frederick. I have a terrible spider plant habit, everybody. Because they breed and then I replant them and then I just have spider plants everywhere. I'm sitting here, there's a spider plant right there. There's actually another spider plant up there, like a little wig that my shelf is wearing. There's a spider plant in my guest bedroom, which I'm not going to show you because it's not done yet. And then a spider plant in my bedroom. And then there's another spider plant somewhere. I cannot keep all things alive, but there are certain plants I can keep alive, and it turns out spider plants one of them, which is a very long way of me saying I have not named my spider plants because I have so many of them. They're just spider plants. I don't think I've really named my plants. I have an odd relationship with plants because I am the daughter of a gardener, a professional gardener, and she has a very exhausting relationship with plants, and I can't keep up with it. So for a very long time I used to say that I had a black thumb, but it turns out I do not. I have in fact inherited my mother's skills, so I do keep plants alive, so I am surrounded by plants. But yes, so that was a long way to say the spider plant has no name. Many things in my life do have names though, like my computer has a name. My current computer's name is Niobe. I tend to name my computer after Greek myth characters. And yeah, my car has a name. My car's name is Chibi. And yeah, so I like to name inanimate objects, but not plants. Plants, I guess I sort of talk to my plants, but my reason for naming inanimate objects is because I have to yell at them a lot, and I feel like it's only polite to yell at them by name, so I better give them a name. But I don't yell at my spider plants, they're fine. TK asks, any sneak peeks into the next Parasolverse novella? Well, I am nursing a scheme. I will tell you that it is in the Claw and Courtship line, and which was supposed to be humans and werewolves, but I think it's gonna be not that. And it's gonna be one of the members of the pack, probably, the Biffy and Lyle's pack. And I have a very good idea on the like romance tropes that I want to use for it. And of course it's being me, and I'm being very clever and meta with those tropes. And that's all I'm going to say because I haven't written it yet. And I don't want to betray you in the future by then suddenly deciding that I have a better idea and writing something else instead, which I do when I haven't started writing a thing yet. So, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that's where we're going next, is something for Claw and Courtship, because I started that and then there's only one book in it. And I was like, well, I need to add more to it. So, you know. So yeah, it'll be a Claw and Courtship book next. That I'm 99% sure that's what it'll be writing. Although some interesting things are happening in my nonfiction world, which might delay that for a little bit. But the next fiction thing I'm writing is definitely Parasolverse, and it's most likely Claw and Courtship. S.H. Klein asks how my Pops is doing. doing? Sorry, I keep kicking my phone, but that's the way it is. He's doing good. I just got the cutest little video of him and his, 80-year-old girlfriend dancing at the Friday night event. So my dad is now in a retirement mobile home community, and where they have totally embraced him, whether he likes it or not, because he's a bit of a curmudgeon, but he's accepted that it's his lot. And that, in the case of my dad, means going to these Friday night, barbecue gatherings that they have while the weather is nice. And they have live karaoke, which mostly the olds don't participate in, but they love watching it and listening to it, and my dad absolutely adores it. I never would have thought this for him, but he loves going and listening to other people do karaoke. It's like his new favorite thing, and he dances. I mean, he kind of moves a little bit, but there's a really the lady who I have who checks up on him regularly when I'm traveling and stuff like that. She sent me the cutest video of him and his girlfriend dancing, by which I mean they're sort of holding hands and shuffling back and forth, but it's very cute. Very cute. So he's doing quite good. Yeah, I think more than anything else, after the sort of crisis at the beginning of the year and having to move him and having to get rid of his stuff and I mean, change is really hard when you're 90, however old he is. He's very old. 91, he's almost 91. Change is really, really difficult when you're that age, obviously, especially as he'd been living in his previous house for 30 years. But he had also been getting increasingly isolated at his previous house, and I kind of didn't realize that that was happening. And now he's in a place where they simply will not let him be isolated. Somebody checks in on him all the time. Everybody keeps an eye on him. I mean, he's snooty about it. Nosy neighbors, blah, 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 blah. But I'm like, yes, please, nosy neighbors. Please, I do not care. They can know everything about you, Dad. We have no secrets anymore. Please, nosy neighbors, keep an eye on him. People visit him. Like I said, he does this Friday thing. Bingo night is about to start up. As soon as the Friday thing stops, they start doing bingo in the winter. So I think he's going to be dragged to bingo night, whether he likes it or not. And yeah, the social interaction is a huge deal. I think it's given him just leaps and bounds in his quality of life. So much higher just interacting and seeing people, whether he likes it or not. So yeah, the Pops is doing really well. Thank you so much for asking. Yeah, it's quite a relief, actually. Flaming Orange asks, I don't know what you mean by flaming orange, but I accept flaming orange. Not my color, I will say. I was thinking as I was putting on this lipstick today that I just respond better to cool tones, so I think I'm probably a cool toned person, whether I should be wearing cool tones or not. Only a color analyst could tell me. The mom spider. Erin is explaining why they have named their spider plant Frederick. What about you guys? Do you guys name your plants? Do you name your inanimate objects? Which camp are we in? Vote now. Tell me. I know many people who don't name either, but I love to name things. I love coming up with names. It's why the names in my books are so varied and ridiculous. Names are fun. Although sometimes I name a thing and then it immediately changes its name to something else. You name the thing and then you end up calling it something completely different. That happens with cats all the time, right? Lilliput is Lilliput, but we call her the Bean because at one point she was prancing around when I'd come home and I was like, look at my little jumping bean, and she's been Bean ever since. So, sometimes the people have their regular name and then sometimes they have their use name, the name you actually call them or it in the case of inanimate objects. I'm gonna have some more tea. Any additional questions? How are we for time? It's very strange for me. I'm talking to you guys from 3:46. Look, I have a time right next to me. I'm talking to you from my home rather than my office where we used to be. The office is all been and done. It has been closed down. I will have a tiny office here at home, but the mainstay office is no more. And it has gone on to a friend of mine has rented it, so I have visitation rights. So I passed it along. I arranged for it to be under new ownership by someone who will love it and enjoy it as much as I did. But yeah, I've downsized and moved everything back into my apartment. So you guys get to see the intimacy of my home. At some point I'll give you a like a little apartment tour, but I'm still getting everything fixed and set up and everything. So then you'll get a little tour. I'm very proud of it. I was trying for like Scandinavian Japandi. I mean, if you talk to me, I was like, I want it to be like an ice queen house, right? No, that is not how it ended up. It turns out I am still a silly, ridiculous human being, and that is not an aesthetic that I comfortably embrace. So my aesthetic is whimsical spa, I have decided. One of the things of which I'm very proud, which I will show you immediately, see if it will, is, you can sort of see it. See? Look, I found these hot air balloon lampshades. I know, I'm ridiculous, but they're so cute. They look like little hot air balloons. Yeah, so that was, yeah. See, you see, I cannot be cool and calm and collected and cold in my decorating style. I have to have hot air balloon lampshades because why wouldn't I want that in my life? 15 minutes is TK. I will tender everybody's greetings to the Lilliput. Angelica asks if I still have room for my Steppy Steppy in my office. Well, it's going to be in the like little spare bedroom office. That's where my standing desk is now. So generally speaking, I prefer to write at standing desks or at least check email and stuff like that. Right now I'm sitting at a vintage desk, which I inherited from my great-grandmother on my dad's side. So it is Scandinavian, Scandinavian antique. And that's where I do the majority of my writing, and it's where I take like Zoom meetings and stuff like that. But I also have a big standing desk, which is actually a wet bar. That's just the perfect height for me. And I transitioned and started using a standing desk years ago. Like I want to say like 15 or 16 years ago, like really early on in my career, before they had invented all the raising, lowering, fancy pants desks, like before it. So I just went out and bought a wet bar that was like the right height for me. So you have to be like my height for this to work, but at my height, it works perfectly. And at that is a monitor that raises up and then other means for me to raise everything up so that I can stand on like a stair walker, but it's not electric, it's just mechanical, and like watch a movie, but also exercise at the same time. That is what Angelica is referring to. My Steppy Steppy is what I call it. It's called like the Sunshine Stepper or something. I don't know. It's basically like a Stairmaster treadmill thing, but it's all just your steps. So it has a little bit of resistance. It's not fancy. I don't do well with technology, everybody. I break it very easily. So it's better if I have really limited technology. And yes, I still have my Steppy Steppy, and it is still going to work in my new office setup. But it's very cramped in there. It's very crowded. And so if I fall off the Steppy Steppy, I can fall conveniently backwards onto the little bed that I'm putting in there, but I need to have a mattress first. So just for my own stability, I'm losing a little bit of my sense of balance as I get older. So I want to make sure the bed is all set up and soft. Right now it's just a bed frame before I really experiment with making the Steppy Steppy work for me again. But also the Steppy Steppy is mostly for the wintertime when I don't want to go outside. And right now it's still beautiful in my neck of the woods. So I'm still taking walks and bike rides and stuff. And that's mostly how I get my exercise. Although I do have to be reminded to leave the house. It used to be that I would bike to the office, and that's how I go. And now I don't have to leave, and so I don't leave. So I have to be reminded to get out of the house occasionally. I just like my house. So yeah, that's the Steppy Steppy is still around, still set up, and I think I can still make it work in the new arrangement. Fancy Pants Desk would be a funny pen name. Fancy Pants Desk. Yes, it would. It'd be very funny. We have a little bit of time for any additional questions. We immediately got off the topic of what happens to a book after I finish it, but I think we covered it all. But if you have any final questions on that matter, now is the time to pick my brain. before we go off about our Saturdays. I do love this tea. It's so good. I am leaving lipstick on the face. This is the downside of old school bullet lipsticks, is they leave memories everywhere. Well, on that note, I hope you all are super excited about the DRATSIE Dilemma. I'm super excited about it. I love the interesting format for it. I think you will adore the character. I mean, Trick, obviously you're gonna love. Who's not to love Trick? But actually Sato is... So if you got the pre-order direct from me, you got to read the rough draft of the very first chapter, which is a pretty clean chapter, quite frankly. I don't think a lot is going to change in that one, but that rough draft is actually from Sato's perspective, who's the other half of this book. So these books, all of the San Andreas books are told in flipped POV, so it's one character and then the other character. And so you know Trick, but you don't know Sato, but you'll get a little taste of what Sato is like in the sample if you do the direct pre-order from me. And I hope you like him. I adore him. I think he's such a fun character. He's like, I love a grumpy character. Sato might be the most misanthropic, grumpiest character I've ever written. He's pretty close to being a psychopath, actually. And it's a joy to write, and I'm really loving that character. So I hope you like Sato. I know you'll like Trick, and I think the book is lots of fun. And it looks like TK has one final question for us. Do I use all of Scrivener's fancy features? All right, in the last couple of minutes, we're going to talk briefly about Scrivener, which is, oh my God, is it overkill? Scrivener is overkill. There's too much in Scrivener. It's like too much program for me. I like a real simple program that does one thing well. Vellum, for example. Vellum is one of life's great joys. It is a formatting software that takes a book you have written and turns it into a book you can publish. That's all it does, and it does it beautifully. It is a clean, stylish, nice... Scrivener is a beast. It's like multiple beasts. It's too much. It's overwhelming, but I love it because it's visual, and I'm a real visual writer, and I like seeing things sort of laid out, and I like, if you saw my notes in like college and graduate school, I take notes that way in like little boxes in different spaces on the page. So Scrivener is really intuitive to me, but it is too many options. So what I did was hire someone to teach me Scrivener. I had been using Scrivener since the first version. So I've been using it for years and I still couldn't use it properly. So at one point, the Bay Area Romance Writers, which is a group that I belong to and that I'm on the board of here locally, which is a romance writing group, had a speaker come and talk about Scrivener and how to better use it, because it is a really hard program to use. And I basically was like, do you do one-on-one coaching? Because I really just need you to train me. And basically she trained me and we set up 2 templates for me to use in Scrivener, which have everything set up the way I like it. And one template is for nonfiction and one template is for fiction. And now I just use that aspect of it. The short answer being, I do not use all of the many, many bells and whistles. I use a few of them that I particularly like and gravitate towards. And then there are some I don't use and probably should and regret later that I haven't, like the snapshot thing, which is really clutch, but I always forget to use it. And if you don't use it, it doesn't do you any good. But yeah, so that's Scrivener. The answer is I ended up having to hire somebody to teach me how to use a program that I've owned for years because it's so much. And so I would not blame anybody for having to do the same. And I do not blame anyone for struggling with Scrivener because it's not intuitive and it's a real struggle to use and to use well and to the maximum of its capacity. But I still love it because it is 1,000 times better than Word, and it is 20,000 times better than Pages. And I will fight you forever on those 2 facts. Those are facts, those are truths, and I will hold to them. So, fight. But yes, but I also wouldn't blame you for writing your novel in text edit or something, because my goodness, is there a lot going on in that program. And on that note, my darlings, thank you so much for finding me and tuning in. I know it's being made a struggle these days, and I don't know how to avoid that or get around it. I think it's just the world of social media and technology these days is very complicated. So on that note, I will see you all. I think I will be doing another one of these next month. And there might be a special guest next month. So look forward to that, and have a lovely rest of your weekend, and I'll have a lovely rest of the month, and I'll see you again. And hopefully we'll get an apartment tour in at some point. I have a guest coming to stay, so I have to make sure everything's finished by then. Alrighty, my darlings. I love you all. Take very good care of yourself, and if you can, take care of somebody else too. And I will check in with you later. Bye.